Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Tuesday morning edition of Charts with Dan. Thank you so much for your patience, not just this week, but in the past several weeks. And as you can probably tell from the thumbnail and the title of this video, before we get to the box office for this past week, there's actually some big changes to this channel, some big changes to my life, some big changes to Mara's life that I wanted to finally let everybody in on, which is the fact that I am no longer a resident of Los Angeles, California. As a matter of fact, a week ago, I got into a U-Haul with a good friend who you might know from the Schmodown, Ben Goddard, who we owe our eternal thanks for helping us do this actual move cross-country, along with some great friends in Los Angeles who helped us pack literally our entire lives into this truck. Drove cross-country, and I am now living in Arkansas, closer to family, and also, quite frankly, a place where Mara and I could really put down roots, where we could buy a house together, which is something that was never in the cards for us in Los Angeles. Honestly, we did not anticipate doing this right now. It was something that we had perhaps put down the line for 2 or 3 years from now. You may recall several weeks ago when I was doing a lot of reviews from the closet of my bedroom at my mom's house, back when Tenet and New Mutants and Mulan and Bill and Ted Face the Music all came out. Well, that was when I was coming here to Arkansas for several reasons. Number one, to visit my family, but also to look at the house that we're sitting in right now. We decided to put an offer in on it, and we bought it. And now it is our new home. This set is version 1.0, really, if that. This is really the setup that I wanted to get done for today's show. There's going to be a lot of improvements and additions to this set that we're still working on. I feel like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Forgive the crudeness of my set. I haven't had time to paint it or build it to scale. That's something that Mara and I are working on, so that's going to be an evolving process. But I really do, want to take a moment to acknowledge this big change. And we could, I guess, have documented everything every step of the way and told everybody what we were doing. But it really was a big step for us. We told close friends and family what was going on. But we really wanted to make this step on our own and let everybody else in on what was happening after the fact, which is why I am just now telling you about where we are, what's been going on. I've had a lot of people ask about the output on the channel, why it has kind of become one video a week for the last few weeks. A lot of it was due to the fact that this was a huge undertaking, a huge enterprise to keep the channel running, to keep everything else that I'm doing running, the Patreon, the podcast, but also to literally pack our things up in boxes to move across the country here to Arkansas. So what is it going to change as far as the channel goes? Not much. We're still going to do charts every Monday. I actually anticipate putting out more videos. There's a live show that I've wanted to do forever, and it just keeps getting pushed back. There were some family health concerns this summer. Then I was traveling. I was looking at this house. We were going through the process of moving, so that kept on getting pushed back and back and back. That live show is going to get going soon. I'm hoping within the next month, so that in addition to the box office news on Mondays, we'll also be doing a live show where I'm covering other entertainment news, taking Streamlabs and Super Chats and all that stuff that I see so many of my friends do, and I've wanted to jump in on that for such a long time. That's going to be coming soon. I also, as we're getting settled in here and we're getting our feet underneath us, doing more reviews. There is going to be a review tomorrow morning, actually, for the new Borat movie that they're springing on us. So really increase the output to the channel, because sadly, as my time has been taken up with this whole process and Mara and I have been preparing everything, it does seem like the YouTube channel is the thing that has had the most time stolen away from it. And so part of that is due to the fact that we are still in the middle of this pandemic and movies aren't really coming out. That's going to be the way, as we'll talk about here in a second, for the near future. But it also means that I can refocus my energies here in the next few weeks back into doing stuff, not just for Patreon and not just the podcast, but also here on YouTube, and try to keep the output going on every front, because I really do love doing all of it. As far as what it's going to change for me as a critic, as somebody who covers movies, again, I don't really know that. I've talked to a few different studios about the fact that obviously every movie you can think of screens in Los Angeles for critics a week or 2 weeks or a month early. Here in Arkansas, that's probably not going to be the case, if I'm being honest. I have asked about, what availabilities those screenings are going to be, but because there are no movies coming out, a lot of the studio reps can't even really tell me because they work with third parties to do those kinds of things around the country. So I don't really know. Worst case scenario is I'll go out and see movies on Thursday night and review them when I get home when everybody else goes and gets to see them. I knew that losing access to a certain extent was going to happen when I left Los Angeles, but I don't do this job for the access. I do this job because I love movies, and I'm lucky enough to do this job because you love movies and you watch and I know the people over at Patreon, subscribe there, and that's why we do this. So yes, I'm going to be losing some of the access, but that was never really why I was in the game to begin with. But really, I'm just excited by the possibilities that this move has, not just for me professionally, but personally with Mara. As I said, we get to continue to build our life together. I can record anytime I want here in the studio. I don't have to worry about the neighbors. I don't have to worry about anybody downstairs. We get to have a lot. You're going to see a bunch of different sets. We're going to have this set. We're going to have a streaming set. We're going to start doing Twitch. We have a whole other room where we can work and broadcast from. There's so much things we can do now that we didn't get a chance to do before.
So much room for activity.
There's so much room for activities. And I'm really, really excited for what it's going to bring. Obviously, the one thing that this means is that I left behind a lot of really, really good friends in Los Angeles. And I spent over 15 years of my life there. And so to leave that behind was not an easy move to make. But at the same time, the way things have been going with this pandemic, Zoom calls and the fact that we've all gotten so much better at staying in touch with each other across distances. And yes, that distance now is several hundred miles, almost 2,000 miles away from where I was. But I still plan, we're going to keep in contact with each other. I will be flying to Los Angeles when things get back to any sense of normalcy. I'll be traveling to Los Angeles a few times a year. I've already talked about how it's going to affect the Schmodown, which is not at all. How it's going to affect the podcast, which is not at all. Everything that I could do as far as business and as far as making videos in Los Angeles, I'm going to be able to do either from here or by traveling a few times a year to Los Angeles. So really, as far as the channel goes, hopefully you're not going to see a whole lot of difference other than what you see behind you and the fact that I'm planning to make more videos here for YouTube as we get settled in and this becomes my home. But it is a big move, and leaving Los Angeles behind is very sad. It's very bittersweet. But Los Angeles, the city that I left over the past several years, has its own issues and has its own problems, and quite frankly, it makes it easier to make the decision to leave because the housing market there is insanely overpriced. Affordable living is hard to find. We're paying far less on a mortgage here in a house in Arkansas than we were paying in rent anywhere in California. We kept running into buildings that could raise your rent by 10 or 15% or more each year. Basically would price you out after a year or two, which means we were constantly living in the fear that we'd have to move out, whether we wanted to or not, in just a year. It makes it hard to find normalcy and routine. It makes it hard to really lay down your roots somewhere and find somewhere that you could call home. The city itself has a lot of problems that it's been facing. A housing shortage, a homeless problem, many things that, quite frankly, I think that the city hasn't been great at dealing with. And I think that those kinds of things make it a little easier for longtime residents to pick up and leave. I know that there are a lot of people that I know that have done the same thing. So the friends that I leave behind in Los Angeles will be missed, although I plan on keeping in touch with all of them. The opportunities, I think, are still there for me. And really what this is a chance to start a new chapter in my life, a new chapter in this channel's life, and for Mara and I, a really exciting new adventure. This is going to be our home, and we look forward to building it and making it together with you, particularly as we run the channel from here. So lots of excitement, lots of changes, but lots of great things in store. And we appreciate your patience over the last several weeks as we've gone through this process. And now that you're in on the secret, let's see where we go from here. So let's get to the matter at hand, this past weekend's box office, and Liam Neeson, usually not at the top of the box office in October. We're usually looking at a January or a February resurgence, but pandemic is what pandemic is, and Liam Neeson's Honest Thief is the newest entry in theaters and the number one movie at $3.7 million. But the sliding scale is pretty crazy. I was looking at this and, $3.7 million, not bad. That's just where the pandemic box office has gotten us. He is number one. The last week's number one, The War with Grandpa, is number two with $2.5 million. Then we have Christopher Nolan's Tenet at number three, $1.6 million. Then two reissues from Disney, The Nightmare Before Christmas and Hocus Pocus, rounding out the top five. That means that two of the three original quote-unquote films that came out right around the time of Tenet, The New Mutants and Unhinged, both exit the top five after several weeks. So really what we're seeing here is a combination of new films, one holdover with Tenet, then we have The Nightmare Before Christmas and Hocus Pocus. Now, a big thing that was announced this week, actually, just in the last 48 hours, was the fact that New York State is going to start allowing theaters to open soon. Now, not New York City. These are going to be theaters outside of New York City, but New York State is beginning to relax its regulations on theaters opening. So we are going to see, it sounds like, some theaters opening very soon. Keep in mind, though, that Regal still has most of its theaters closed. I think it's closed all but 7 of its theaters, and all those are in California. So we will see how many theaters actually do open as New York relaxes regulations. This is a big milestone that the theater chains were looking for. However, again, cases are on the rise in many states, so we will see if this lasts. AMC issued some pretty dire news, which is that they could potentially be out of cash at the end of this year. So time is really ticking away for these theater chains. This news of a loosening of restrictions of opening theaters in some areas where they were not open before is definitely welcome if you are a theater owner. But then the question now becomes, what is the tipping point, and where does a chain like Regal decide to reverse their decision and open up theaters? It could likely be around the Christmas season, although things keep on moving. There was another film that moved that we're going to talk about when we look at the schedule. But let's see what happens, because finally some movement for theaters opening in New York State. Let's look at the 2020 domestic box office. Nothing changes here. As I mentioned, Tenet is slowly climbing towards building up that chart, but it's also falling back on the charts. Perhaps we will see a resurgence if there are more theaters that open. I was reading that there were some theaters in Seattle, around the Seattle area, that opened, and those are actually some of Tenet's biggest markets over the weekend. So we'll see if Tenet begins climbing that chart again. This is the 2020 worldwide box office chart, and My People, My Homeland, which is a Chinese film we've talked about the last couple of weeks, it jumps over Tenet for the number 3 spot for 2020. Tenet now number 4. There is another film from China called Leap that is very close to overtaking Onward to become the number 10 movie of the year. So that means we would have 4 of the top 10 for 2020 would be just from the Chinese market alone. Now, a lot of times we'll see that in the early part of the year with the Chinese New Year, when they flood the marketplace with a lot of different releases. Not so common here at the end of the year, at the end of 2020. So the Chinese market is probably still likely to become the number 1 film market globally, overtaking North America and the United States. But we will see if that actually becomes the case. I would be kind of surprised at this point if it's not. However, there was some other box office news that I wanted to talk about, which is that Japan, who is also has light years ahead of the United States as far as movie theaters, etc., they actually had their biggest opening weekend ever for any movie with the feature adaptation of a manga called Demon Slayer. That was open to almost $45 million in Japan this past weekend. That is a huge result for Japan. And again, this is not with an asterisk of, the best opening during the pandemic, etc. The best opening weekend for any film ever. this past weekend in Japan. So it seems like just about almost everywhere but the United States, there are sparks and signs of life at the box office. Recovery still here in the United States remains slow, so we are lagging behind on that front. That also is perhaps a reason why there was a big deal that was announced reportedly between Paramount and Amazon, and it involves December 18th, which was a date that at one point was very crowded. Dune was on December 18th. It's now been moved. Death on the Nile is still on December 18th, but Coming to America, which was the sequel to Coming to America, which was slated to open on December 18th, was sold to Amazon reportedly for $125 million. The reported premiere date for that on Amazon is still December 18th, so the day that it would have opened in theaters. But now here we see, again, I think 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago is when I made this, and this was fresh. But now we see another film moving. Wonder Woman 1984 remains on the list for December 25th, and then we have a few before then. And again, these are not all the releases. A few people have said, like, oh, what about this movie? What about that movie? This is a select movie release schedule. So there are some other films that you can fill in these slots. As movies keep moving, perhaps I will fill in those slots so we can at least see what the full release schedule is for movies coming up. Movies like War with Grandpa and Honest Thief and stuff that we're now seeing at the number one slot. Let's go back to a time when people were going to the movies, and this is a flashback to a key weekend in the year 1999, which was itself a key year for moviegoers. David Fincher's Fight Club opened this past weekend, back in 1999, the weekend of October 15th through 17th. But the movie itself was not a huge box office hit. It would later find much more of its audience as its reputation grew. That poster that you see there, I had that exact poster on my dorm room wall. Like that exact poster. Class of 2001, that movie hit the bullseye for me. But yeah, Fight Club there in its first week. Nipping on its heels, though, was Double Jeopardy, which was an Ashley Judd crime thriller with Tommy Lee Jones. That was just behind it in its fourth week. That was a big hit in 1999. Then at number 3, The Story of Us with Michelle Pfeiffer, and believe it or not, there was a time when Bruce Willis was a believable romantic lead. A believable lead in a romance film. Hard to believe now he's hawking Die-Hard car batteries, but back then he could carry a romance. That's kind of how he started. He was on Moonlighting. Yes, he was. Back in 1999, The Story of Us, week 1, also kind of nipping at Fight Club's heels. Then one of my Schmoedown nemeses, Three Kings, as I can now tell you, directed by David O. Russell, which I could not have pulled that answer a couple years ago, or however long ago that was. What was that, 5 years ago? I don't know. $7.2 million in its third week. And then in fifth place in week 5, it was actually beginning its expansion, or continuing its expansion. The eventual Best Picture winner for 1999, American Beauty, $6.6 million in fifth place in week number 5. Some other notable films that opened this past weekend in box office history. 1939, another key year in movie history. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington from Frank Capra was released. Then in 1982, you had a double shot. You had First Blood, which I can't think of a movie whose first and second movies were more different than First Blood and then Rambo First Blood Part 2. But in 1982, First Blood hit theaters the same weekend as Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which has been championed by many horror fans as an underrated franchise entry in the Halloween franchise. Then in 1992, Candyman, another horror movie that really built its reputation over the years. It opened at number 4. Did not open anywhere close to number 1 back in 1992. And then in 2006, hard to believe, 14 years ago, Christopher Nolan's The Prestige opened at number 1. But again, a lot of these movies, Halloween 3, Candyman, even The Prestige, I would argue, have found more acclaim and prestige, if you will, in the years after their opening at the box office. Let's see what people are watching on the streaming charts. Over on Amazon, Love and Monsters, starring Dylan O'Brien, was the #1 film of the week. We'll see that on another chart here in a second. Then you have Mulan 2020, which, as we mentioned last week, has expanded its presence beyond just Disney Plus here in the last few weeks. Halloween Town, which is still killing the Halloween season on Amazon. People love that Disney Channel original. Kajillionaire, which is a festival film that is now making its debut here on on-demand services. I've heard some great things about it. I have not seen it yet. It's there at #4. Then The Doorman at #5, King of Staten Island, Antebellum, and Hocus Pocus. Those are all holdovers from last week. Then at #9, The Nightmare Before Christmas. People watching it Halloween, even though it is a Christmas film, and I will debate you on that, and I have. And then Megan Fox's Rogue returning to the top 10 on Amazon. Let's look at what is there on iTunes. What are people renting from the iTunes store or buying from the iTunes store? Love and Monsters, #1 as well over on the iTunes chart, followed by Trump Card, which we mentioned last week. Ava, Relic, which came out earlier this year, was kind of a big drive-in hit. That is now doing, again, some VOD business. That rental window probably opened up there. Then we have Mulan 2020 at #5. Totally Under Control, which is a movie from a documentarian named Alex Gibney, who's done a lot of documentaries in the past 10, 15, 20 years that have made some big splashes. This is about the pandemic and the government response. That's there at #6. Then The Secret, Dare to Dream, and Beetlejuice new to this week's top 10 list at numbers 7 and 8. Then Hocus Pocus and The Doorman at 9 and 10. And finally, let's look at what's going on over on Netflix. Adam Sandler continues his domination with Hubie Halloween. It is the #1 movie of the week. Then The Trial of the Chicago 7 from Aaron Sorkin is there at #2. Moneyball at #3. And Aaron Sorkin, again, he's got #2 and #3. A Babysitter's Guide to Monster Hunting comes in at #4. In a Valley of Violence at #5. Then we have American Murder, The Family Next Door. American Pie, Girls Rules, which is there from last week. Unfriended, people watching those spooky movies. The Grinch, the Illumination version of The Grinch, not the Ron Howard version. And then I Am Vengeance, Retaliation at #10. So that's what I've got as far as charts go. A little bit abbreviated compared to what we usually do, but I'm glad that I could finally let everybody in on what's been going on in my life and in our life, and to sort of clear the air and just really look forward to a lot of great stuff in the future. So you will be seeing some changes behind me as we build up the set and as we build up this room. But please do stay tuned for more news about the live show that I'm going to be launching here in the next few weeks, as well as more reviews and other things here for the channel that I look forward to doing. And as I mentioned, don't forget, tomorrow morning, the embargo drops on Sacha Baron Cohen's top secret, really, Borat sequel, which is going to be coming out on Amazon this week. So stay tuned for that review and hopefully many more to come. And if you want to know other stuff that I'm doing, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. These are some of my incredible producer level patrons who have been my biggest supporters, and I really do thank all of them. They actually were just let in on what's been going on a couple of days ago, so they didn't even really know what was happening, but they have been so amazing and patient and supportive as we've been going through all of this. And this has been a fun month over on Patreon. We've been doing 31 days of Halloween with posts every day and doing a lot of things like that. We still have our monthly watch along coming up, and they just voted. The winner by one vote was Anaconda. So we're going to be doing the watch along for Anaconda over on Patreon here in just a few days. Producer commentaries, director commentaries, one for The Shining that I just did. So many fun things like that. Please, we would love to see you over on Patreon. It's also just a great community. We have a really great Discord server going on with conversations and movies and people saying, I like this, I didn't like that. We have Dan's Movie Club, people watching Young Frankenstein and Beetlejuice for the first time. So much fun. We'd love to see you over on Patreon. And don't forget about my podcast, All My Movies, which drops every Wednesday afternoon, both on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you can find podcasts, as well as a video version, which you can find over on the Schmodown Entertainment Network here on YouTube. And thanks for checking me out here on my channel. I appreciate your support as we move onward and upward. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.